Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm joined here today by Sue West, who's one of our senior consultants here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So today Sue's going to be talking us through two key rules all organisations should be following when they implement ISO 9001, which is the international standard for quality management systems. So Sue, would you mind telling us about the first of these rules?
Oh, yes. Rule number one is that irrespective of why an organisation decides to implement ISO 9001 or their personal opinions, management should always be seen to demonstrate commitment and leadership to obtain maximum benefit from the system.
I think the first question that arises for me from that is, what is the difference between top management commitment and leadership?
Well, requirements for top management and leadership, they're referenced in various parts of the ISO 9001 standard, but I think the best thing is to focus on clause 5.1.1 of the standard, which is actually labeled leadership and commitment. But before we actually go down into all the details, I think the best thing is break down the words in the sentence. In other words, look at the definitions. If we talk about top management is they're at the highest level in a business. They set the direction, they set the strategy. They're the ones you've got to go through to get a budget approved. They decide what resources you can have and which ones you can't have, and are probably the ones that authorize the company to implement ISO 9001 in the first place. So they're at the very top of the business and they set the strategy and direction. But sometimes a quality management system will only cover part of an organization. It doesn't cover the whole organization. So if we go back to ISO 9000, which is the one that defines all the vocabulary for 9001, it says that if a quality management system covers only part of the organization, then top management becomes those managers that direct and control that part of the organization. So in those instances, you can exclude other top managers, but you have to include those that are responsible for those parts of the business within the scope of the quality management system. Now, it's important then that where we have a quality management system, that we know who the top management is in relation to the quality management system. And it's evident they're going to need the necessary authorities that the standard requires them to fulfill. So that's really is the most important thing. If it's not covering the whole business, we need to definitely know who is the top management sector. Now, moving on to that, what are they actually committing to? Well, everybody knows that managers are going to say we are fully committed to quality in a business, because it's not good for business to say we're not committed to quality, because nobody's going to buy from them then. You know, they're never going to say our business doesn't, you might hear it from an employee or two, but you're never going to hear it from top management. But if we come back to clause 5.1 of the standard, it is not asking for the managers to commit to quality. It's asking them to commit and show leadership to the quality management system itself. Not quality management system. And there's a difference there. And of course, they have to demonstrate this, which means they have to be able to prove it or show evidence that they've done this leadership and commitment in accordance with the standard requirements. So moving on, leadership. In a nutshell, leadership is really more about behaviors. It's less tangible than commitment, but still, we need to be able to show evidence of this. Now, fortunately, in 511, ISO 9001, they've been very kind to us, and they've given us a sort of list of things that we can use to demonstrate leadership and commitment. So when we're talking leadership, let's look at 511. We say clause D, it says promote the use of the process approach and risk-based thinking. Clause F says communicate the importance of effective quality management. Clause H, it says engage, direct, and support persons to contribute to the effectiveness of the QMS. Clause I says promote improvement. And clause J, support other relevant managers to demonstrate leadership. So what it's looking for is that leaders motivate and help the people perform to their maximum potential. They want top management to have a more hands-on, direct involvement. So you can't delegate the support. You have to be able to prove that as a top manager, you've done it yourself. Commitment is just as important, although from a different point of view, because commitment really relates to the obligations that top management have to the QMS, because at the end of the day, top management has authorized the implementation of the QMS. Then it is accountable for making sure that the QMS achieves its intended objectives, just the same as when it sets the company's budgets or it sets its strategic targets. It's just as accountable for the business to achieve those objectives and strategic directions. So it's exactly the same for the standard. Now, top management can and does obviously delegate responsibilities for various activities to others to do. They don't do everything in the business themselves, but at the end of the day, they have to ensure that everything is done because they are accountable, and you can't delegate accountability. Accountability stays with the top management. The buck stops right there. So coming back to clause 5.1, and we look for the examples of commitment now. So we're saying, right, clause B, top management needs to ensure that the quality policy and ensure the quality objectives are established. They have to ensure the integration of the QMS requirements into the business processes. They have to ensure resources needed are available. And again, ensure the QMS achieves its intended results. Now, the level of top management commitment is really demonstrated by how well these requirements are met. Now, clause 5.1 is one of those sort of general clauses, because if you look at 5.1, you'll see that there's other clauses relate to it. 5.1 talks about the quality policy and quality objectives, but quality policy is also stated in 5.2. Quality objectives are in clause 6. So you have them in other areas of the standard. And before anyone said anything, clause 5.2 does not 100% line up with 5.1. Because in clause 5.2, it says top management shall do the policy, whereas 5.1 says it shall ensure it's done. It's one of those standard things, all right? So we just accept it, but we go with that top management has to do it. Now, the interesting thing is, if we're looking at all these other clauses and the auditors come in and then they go through and they have findings against all these areas, they are perfectly entitled to raise a finding against 5.1.1, in other words, management commitment, if all these things that demonstrate management commitment have got non-conformances raised against them. So you'd have the finding against the clause, and then you can have a finding against management commitment. So it's well worth remembering that.
Why is the commitment and the leadership of top management so important to the QMS?
All right, so bear with me here because it might sound like I'm going to be waffling a little bit, but I will, I'm trying to give you the background. First of all, there's several benefits that you can achieve from implementing a quality management system, and not least the contribution it can make to improving revenue and profitability. And I know quite a lot of people have said to me, quality's got nothing to do with finance and revenue. Nonsense, right? Absolute nonsense. But these benefits can differ from one company to another, and it relates to why the company has put in the QMS in the first place, what they want to achieve from it. Now, sometimes, and a little bit more too often than I would like, the management make a decision to implement a QMS because it's been forced onto them. Either a parent company has said they have to do it, or customers, said we want to have it, and if you don't give it to us, you're not going to have our business, that sort of thing. So it's not a voluntary commitment, it's more of a forced commitment. So the reason for implementing a quality management system becomes then because we have to, and they're not really interested. So it's not a great start, because management then really hasn't got any ideas or objectives for the QMS. It's just, we're going to put one in because we have to, and that's the end of it. Right. Now, a quality management system is a long-term commitment. It's not something you put in for a year and then get rid of. It is a long-term commitment, but it is not a magic wand. And this, again, I think is something that's been misunderstood about it. The system does not solve the issues and the problems. People do. They still do. Having a quality management system does not take that away from them. All a quality management system is, it's a tool for management to actually implement within the business the strategy that it has set out. It enables them to control operations and changes within the business and then drive the business towards achieving the objectives and targets it has set up. You can liken the quality management system to your laptop or your phone, because it will sit there and it will do nothing until you pick it up and use it. And even though your smartphone can do all these marvelous things, if you only use it to make a phone call, that's all it will do. A quality management is the same thing. It will do what you want it to do. It will only work at the level at which you use it. So if you don't make the maximum use of it, then you're wasting a lot of what you could be doing it. So now come back to employees. Take a look, just think about employees in general. We do our work, we do our tasks, on a day-to-day basis, we probably deal with customers and suppliers, the interfaces with our companies more often than the more senior managers. We produce the products, we deliver the services offered by our organization. Now, we in turn report to managers who communicate expectations for performance. They tell us if we're doing well or we're not doing well. We see them as the one who holds the sort of tick in the box, or you're going to get a good bonus, you're not going to get a good bonus, you're going to get a pay rise or you're not going to get a pay rise. That's the way a business generally, and I'm saying generally, operates. Now, really, to me, middle management has a tough time of it, because they've got the expectations of the employees and having to manage the employees. They've got the top management at the top putting pressure on them to achieve certain things and do certain things. So they do tend to get a little bit squeezed between the two levels. It can be quite hard to get that balance right sometimes. Now, top management, again, coming back to those that set the objectives, reward performance, set budgets, what have you, they set the direction, the culture and tone of the business. And it's this that gets spread through that layers from top management to middle management to employees throughout everybody in the business. So we previously looked at the elements of leadership and commitment, but think about what would happen in an organization if your top management does not demonstrate that commitment and leadership we spoke about. So if, as a middle manager, you believe that your top management is not interested or doesn't care about the quality management system because you keep getting pulled off to do something else and that can always get left, why should they make it a priority for their employees? Why should they be spending time, which 9 times out of 10 managers don't have, to try and promote something that top managers not really driving forward or showing any interest in, right? If the employees see that there's no benefit for them to implement a quality management system because nobody's asking them, they're not being measured on it, they're just going for the day-to-day stuff, why should they waste their time trying to do something that is not important to their managers? So straight away, you've got this lack of implementation coming through from the top rather than the motivation to do something about it. So middle managers and employees follow the lead, they'll neglect the QMS. Right? Because it's not integrated and managers always putting them on to focus on to other things. And I've heard it often, we're going to have a management meeting to talk about this, but then we got pulled off to do something else. And it's the way it happens because something else is always more important. Yeah. So then you thought, right, we've got no direction, we've got no communication, we've got no training, we're not getting the resources for the QMS. So it tends to start falling into sort of, it's a little sideline. It's something we'll pull out and we'll dust once a year. We'll get in front of the auditors. We'll quickly spend a couple of weeks getting everything sorted so we can get through the audit and then we'll carry on, go back to normal. It's not part of the way we actually work. And the sad thing about that is because so much time and effort is just being wasted just to keep it there so that they can say we've got a quality management system, but you're not really getting any benefit from it. You're not getting the real benefit that you should be getting from it at all. Top management commitment easily is the most critical factor in the success of a quality management system. But it does require top management to make some time and some effort to create the environment in the first place where everybody is engaged. It needs that motivating factor coming from the top to make sure everybody realizes it's important. So, and to me, as I've said, if they're going to spend the time and the money on actually having this long-term investment, rather than have it as a money drain, achieve the maximum benefit. You've got to have it, you're going to do it, you might as well make the best of it and get the best benefit from it that you can.
So moving on to the next key rule, can you talk us through that second rule that you wanted to discuss today?
This is actually rule number 3. Develop, establish, and implement a quality management system that fits the business and its operations. This is my pet one, this one. That's why I picked it for today.
Brilliant. So I think you sort of started to allude to this earlier when you were talking about the previous rule, didn't you? You sort of began to sort of skate over why this is important. But so it sounds to me like there isn't really a one-size-fits-all quality management system. Am I right in thinking that?
Absolutely. There is no way you can actually have a proper, effective quality management system because there's so many different types of businesses. I mean, think about it. The beauty of ISO 9001, and it might seem strange that I'm talking about a beautiful standard, but the beauty of it is that you can fit it to any organization, whether it's a little small corner shop, the one-man business sitting there, or you can have it to this multi-site, several countries wide, employing thousands of people. It really doesn't matter. You can apply it to anybody. You can apply it in any in any industry or market. It just fits. And the reason it fits is because you have to fit it to your business. Right? Now, even organizations that operate within the same market or industry, they've got different ways of working. They've got a different structure. They've got different titles. They've got different roles. They've just set it up different ways. So I remember, and this is going back really more years than I really want to think about, the very first ISO 9001 standards were numbered from 4.1 to 4.20. And it was also very document heavy. They required procedures for just about everything. And at that time, a lot of companies were just documenting their quality management system in accordance with the clauses. So if you had a clause that said identification and traceability, you would have a procedure for that. If you had one that said storage and preservation, you would have a procedure for that. And I actually used to feel sorry for people, especially those who, worked, say, in a warehouse, because by the time they'd even started work, they had about 8 procedures that they had to read, totally talking about different things, very document heavy, and people found it very bureaucratic, which it really was, because that was the way they were being implemented. And I think today, a lot of that apprehension about the standard and quality management system sort of goes back. It's sort of inherited from those early days, and it's just persistently going on through all the changes. But today, the standard requires so much less documentation. There's very few documents actually required by the standard. And it very clearly encourages organizations to implement a quality management system that suits their own operations. So if you have a look again, the process approach, one of the 7 principles of the quality management system and ISO 9001 standard, that process approach is really good. Clause 511, that requires top management to ensure the QMS requirements are built into the organization's business processes. It doesn't say adapt your business processes to the standard. It says integrate the standard requirements into the business processes. Clause 7.5 talks about documenting information required by the standard and those considered necessary by the organization. So although the standard might only require 2 or 3 documents, you can put in what you need according to your business. Clause 8.1, the operational planning and control clause, that says the output of planning has to be suitable to the business's operations. So it's not suitable to the standard, suitable to the operations. And then if you do design and development, clause 831 says have an appropriate design and development process, appropriate to the business. Right? So it's there throughout the standard now, encouraging companies to put in the system that aligns with their business or is part of their business. Right? Again, the standard, it says requirements that you need to meet. But again, it doesn't tell you how to meet those requirements. How you choose to meet those requirements, again, depends on the company.
Yeah.
And it's the systems they have. I mean, if you've got more IT systems, you're obviously going to do more IT. If you've got manual systems, you're going to do more manual systems. But it totally is based on how your company operates.
That makes sense. I think that makes a bit more sense than having such a sort of prescriptive way of doing it as you seem to, as you mentioned, it used to have. You mentioned the term, the process approach. Would you mind just explaining what the process approach means?
Personally, to me, this is one of the key changes that have occurred over the years. Now, initially, as I said, most companies would document their system in accordance with the ISO 9000 and clauses. And I actually believe some companies still do it, but I'm hoping that fading away and the practice is, being replaced, because it's not how a company works. Now, ISO 9000, coming back to the vocabulary document again, that states that a process is a set of interrelated or interacting activities that transform inputs into outputs. So you've got three phases. You've got inputs, transforming activities, and outputs. That's a process. Now, if you think about it, almost everything we do is a process or part of a process. And I still, to this day, a lot of people say to me, we don't have processes. Salespeople in particular want to tell me they don't have processes, right? But actually, whether they are documented, written down or not, process is still there. If you're going to have processes within an organization, they should have a reason for being. Otherwise, why are you doing them? It's a waste of resources and time. So when you're setting up a process or deciding or looking at the process, why is the process there? Why are you doing it? What do you want this process to achieve? So you need to have an objective for it, and then you measure it, because then you want to know that your process is working properly. That's the simple quality management side of it. But then again, you need resources for a process to work. Now, most of us, we'll go ahead, we'll do our work, we'll use our laptop, we'll use our phone, we're using the software, all of those things that we need to do our work or our job. But at the end of the day, those resources are an output of another process. They've been provided to us for us to be able to work in this process, but it's come from another process, resource management process, something like that. But it's come from there. And we don't even think about it. We just pick up the tools and use them. Yeah. But the quality manager has to think about them, because they all have to come together. So when you're implementing a quality management system, you're really looking to achieve consistent, predictable results. And that's what, part of quality is all about, although quality is a totally separate discussion. But we need to be able consistently to provide that accepted level of service or product to our customers. And that we have the standardized approach, and we have these processes in place, with the principle behind them being that we repeatedly have a successful process and we implement it on a repeated basis, and we achieve the same successful results. That's the planning of it. Right? Now, a process can work within one department, or it can work across multiple departments. Right? Again, it's not one department specific. You follow the process through. Because you have to decide at some point, where does one process start, where does another one finish? But if we look at the simple process, and let's take a really simple one, we're just going to place a purchase order, and we take the process definition, input, activity, output. So what's the input? An input is the trigger. What kicks off the process? Well, then it's obviously the need to buy something. So what is the activity or activities that we're doing? Well, we're taking that need, we're looking at pricing, we're looking at where we can buy it, we're looking at our suppliers, and then we actually place the purchase order. So what is the output of that particular process? It's a purchase order has been placed with the supplier. That's the simple process of it. So what's the purpose or objective of the process? Now, this can vary depending from company to company, but for the sake of this particular one, let's say it's just to ensure we maintain minimum stock levels. So we get told stock levels are falling low, kicks off the order requirement, we put the order, put it onto the suppliers, get the delivery, hopefully on time, right? So there is the objective for the process. Now, if the minimum stock falls below the required levels, then we've got a problem with the process. Somewhere the process has not worked properly to maintain that objective. Now we know what to go and look for, right? We can go and have a look and see where's the issue. So just think of it in terms of anything and apply those process principles to it. Think about washing dishes, for example, right? The inputs, the activities, the outputs. Where does it start? Where does it end? What resources do you need? And believe me, for washing dishes, there's a long, long list of resources. And you'd be surprised. Talk about arranging a holiday, buying a car. And it's not just the activities, it's the the order of the activities, because you want them to be efficient and effective. So you've got to think about the order in which you do them, okay? But if you tried on something, simple, like the washing dishes, arranging a holiday, then it's easier to grasp the principles, of what a process is. So now we've got the process. Now remember what it said. ISO 9001 says that we integrate requirements into the business process. So we've got the business process. Now we take this one step further and we say, which clauses of the standard apply? So obviously we've got clause 7.2 because 7.2 is competency. So whoever's doing that process needs to be relatively competent in accordance with what the business classifies as competent. Right? The business has that right to say, if you've done this or that training, you're competent. Then authority. As we all know, placing purchase orders, you don't generally allow everyone to go and place £1 million purchase order. It has to get approved at various levels. So you need to define the authorities in there as to who can place which purchase orders or value of purchase orders. And then clause 8.4, which talks about the externally provided processes, we can only place purchase orders on approved suppliers that have been evaluated. We have to make sure we give them the appropriate information. And then a separate process, we monitor their performance against those requirements, such as on-time delivery. So we design this process and integrate the 9001 requirements into that process. So we add them in. So we've met those requirements. Now we've got that, but now one step further, the purchase order, the input into the process is the identified need to buy something, whatever it was. But where does that need come from? It's come from another process. It's come from somewhere else. Probably, say, in the warehouse where they have dispatched an order against another order, and they've said, our stock's getting low, we need to get a purchase order put out. But it's come from another process. So that is an output of the other process, which now performs an input to the purchasing process. Your outputs and inputs on these connected processes, that's the risk. Sometimes they get a little bit out of sync, but generally the output of one, when it feeds into the other, should be the same. So again, where do the resources come from? From another process, the resource management process, and so on and so on. No process sits on its own. I don't know if you've ever seen flowcharts, but I used to see quite a few where you had this one little process sitting on its own in the corner. Nonsense. No process is an island. They're always connected, at least to one other process, and sometimes multiple other processes. And there you have your quality management system built on the process approach. It's a network of processes that are appropriate to your business, that meet the requirements of ISO 9001, and they work together to achieve the business objectives.
Amazing. Well, thank you very, very much, Sue, for taking the time to sit down and chat with me today. So for anyone that's interested about this topic, Sue's written an excellent blog that can be found on our website, urmconsulting.com. And it's called The 5 Golden Rules for Implementing ISO 9001. So we've covered rule number 1 and number 3 from that blog today. But there's 3 more really, really great rules that Sue outlines and explains for us in that blog. So please go and give that blog a read. Thank you for listening today. you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.